Welcome to Two Girls in a Pod Life's Journey, where we explore the journey of becoming the best version of ourselves. Join me, Christy, and my partner Sharon, a licensed professional counselor for over 20 years, as we dive into conversations with inspiring individuals who've overcome obstacles and achieved their goals. We'll discuss the power of self-awareness, compassion, and collaboration, and how embracing our authentic selves can create a ripple effect of positive change. Let's embark on this path of growth, empowerment, and connection together. I want to remind you to follow us on social media. If you love this podcast, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky. If you'd like to find out more about what goes on behind the scenes, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Adventures of Two Girls in a Pod, where we highlight some of our travels near and far. Or watch Sharon mix up a batch of drinkable delights on Sip and Savor. Also, if you love this podcast, leave us a review on Spotify. This helps us get discovered by even more amazing listeners like yourself. Share with your friends and family, and make sure to subscribe to our website at twogirlsinapod.com so that you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening.
Hello and welcome to Two Girls in a Pod. I'm Sharon.
I'm Christy. We're super excited. We have a guest on with us today. Licensed sex and gender feminist psychotherapist, best-selling author, researcher, professor, and media personality, Dr. Tina Schermer-Sellers. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with both of you.
Thank you.
It was so interesting because, reading all the stuff that you do, because you do just a plethora of stuff, of all, and go on ahead and just if you could just give a brief synopsis of the stuff you are involved with and what you do.
Oh, gosh. So the areas that I find my fingers in the most, and it really grew out of, 40-year career and following my heart, where my heart was leading me to go. Which all sounds a little ooey-oo, but there's a lot of foundational stuff underneath all that. But I ended up doing pretty extensive research on the impact of religious sexual shame, authoritarian households, on people's lives, their ability to feel valuable and worthy as humans, ability to present themselves with authenticity in their lives, and to form relationships that were deeply meaningful and transparent and authentic, so that they felt seen, known, loved, and accepted, which is kind of a human desire. And so I spent a lot of time researching that, because in my clinical work and in my being a professor, I was seeing the impact and I wanted to understand it more. And so I just did extensive work there, and then ended up writing my first book, because I thought people don't understand what is shaping their lives and why they keep feeling like I've been doing everything right and I'm still not happy, or I'm still not this, I'm still not that, or my relationship is much harder than, or I feel I don't like myself. I mean, deep down, I just don't, And so helping them sort of see, well, here's the history of how that got shaped in the US in particular. And, but I kind of go way back in history so that you can just say, there's an arc here. And then, that arc really led to the way we do capitalism, exploiting people and trying to control people. So power and control was involved the whole time. And so people can see, oh, it's not me. I'm not broken, and then they could begin the process of grief, because there's a real sense of betrayal, because the people who did this loved them often very much. However, the way they were going about doing it, expressing sort of their fear, really had a lot to do with power and control. And then giving them ideas on here's how you heal from that kind of thing. And here's how you claim what is authentic to you, whatever is authentic to you, as far as spirituality, sexuality. And so I just go through a lot of stuff that way. That led to the work that I was doing with physicians and psychotherapists. And then people who had read that book were coming to me and saying, like parents in particular were saying, that's been really helpful to see all that. I feel a lot more liberated and grounded. However, I don't want to do to my kids what was done to me. Can you help me? And then I was having physicians be like, I don't have time to help parents or help people coming into my office. I've got 10 minutes. What can I do? And I'm like, okay, I will create handouts for you that are on that age or whatever. And then that ended up becoming also the book, Shameless Parenting, for parents and for people who just want to heal. Like, what should I have? If you can put that in words, I'd never like to should on people, but what should I have gotten in my infancy, my toddlerhood, my preschool, my grade school, and so on and so forth. And they can see, and they can read the books that a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 15-year-old would read. And they could feel like that inner part of them that still feels shame for the things they thought and felt at those ages can begin to feel some liberation. And then parents feel like somebody's holding their hand, because it's literally chapters are birth to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, up to 18. So I always say to parents, you just need to be 2 years ahead of your kiddos. You don't have to have it all figured out. In fact, work on yourself, just be a little bit ahead of them, And so that became so much of what I did. And then later in my career, I went back and studied what I really wanted to understand, the research of what was happening in psychedelics for the treatment of pretty significant trauma in people's lives, whether most of the trauma, over than 65% of it, is sexual trauma. But there's a significant, and we hear the most in the media about war trauma, which is important too. But it's also, it's not the bulk. And we have now created a culture and a society that creates trauma for a vast majority of people. They are under-resourced. People are stressed out in their lives. They grew up with violence. They're passing on violence and neglect because they're completely overwhelmed. And we have no social supports, or very little social supports in place anymore. And that grates on your self-esteem as well. So I wanted to understand, what's the research saying in psychedelics? Are we able to help people liberate and heal faster than our traditional psychotherapy, and our drugs really don't do much of anything? And so that's my latest endeavor, has been supporting clinicians who went on to train in that, because we don't have a government right now that's really supporting them or supporting healing or healthcare in general, So that's kind of one of the things I've got my fingers in now, is working with clinicians around supporting them so they feel they can do what they need to do to be a healer in the world.
Well, I think it's interesting because when we're talking about healing the narrative of somebody, oftentimes and I know as a therapist, one of the things I talk to my clients about is that we find that we are doing all the right things and we're not finding the results we want. And oftentimes it's because we still haven't turned off the narrative of somebody else. We're still trying to live somebody else's version of who we are. So it sounds like the work that you're doing is trying to break those generational cycles, because it has to start with one person. And like you said, even if you can take a parent and teach them to parent differently. And when I taught parenting, one of the things I told them is, I think everybody who's in this room with us right now is doing the best possible job that they can with the knowledge they have. So what you're saying is, you have your knowledge, but let me add more knowledge to it. Do you find that people have been really receptive to that? And also, do you find that you have had people that have kind of kicked against it?
I haven't had as much kick against it. And that doesn't mean those people aren't out there, because certainly I talk about the research that's behind comprehensive sex education, and people don't even understand what that means. So they hear that and you're like, you're teaching a 5-year-old about blowjobs. And yeah, no, actually we're not doing that, And so for people to understand what is comprehensive sex education, and it's from littles up through 8 or 9, it's emotional intelligence, relational intelligence. It's knowing where you begin and end and somebody else, your boundaries, autonomy, how to speak up for yourself, how to listen to others, how to learn to manage conflict. It's really about it's all the things that are foundational to a healthy relationship, right? And then from there, we go on from there. But when you say, am I adding more knowledge? Am I finding people absorbing that and having that work for them, or are they pushing against it? really what I'm also trying to do is to invite them to review their narrative. So to embody it, not just cognitive, like I'm going to look at, well, what was my home like when I was 2 or when I was 4 or 6 or 8? Well, what was like, how are people expressing things around, um, affection or gender or my body, or what were the messages that I was getting, and then if they get kind of clear about, oh, this is what I was taught, well, that may have something to do with what I'm thinking now. I can go get these kiddo books and I can read them to myself, and I can pay attention to what it feels like inside of me when I hear these stories, these words spoken to me. Can I feel the part of me that goes, oh, I was such a good kid. I was a good kid, or whatever. So I'm really hoping to invite people not just to absorb things cognitively, but to walk themselves through their narrative and to examine it, but in a way that invites a new experience, that lets some of that shame let go, so that their reactivity with other people in their lives isn't so great. That when their kid or their niece or nephew does something that they might notice now, oh, I can see I'm uncomfortable with that. Oh, that's because I didn't get what I needed. I can sit with that. I can go learn, that kind of thing. So I'm wanting it to be more than just knowledge,
I think that's a great approach. It sounds like it would be a very impactful way to approach the subject.
Well, and I think too, when you're talking about the cognitive versus that internal piece of us, I think that's why people continue to have that incongruency. Because
Mm.
cognitively they can regurgitate all the verbiage, but
Right.
then when you ask them, how do you apply that?
Yeah.
It's like, what? You
Yeah.
know, and the other thing that I find so fascinating is ages and stages of development.
Uh-huh.
This is such a big thing with me because oftentimes when working with families and stuff, when parents are communicating with children and the child's not doing what their expectation is, I often tell them sometimes you're asking them to do something that is above their cognitive ability. And also, how many times have you talked with parents who say, "Oh my God, I'm using my parents' words, and I said I would never do that."
Exactly, exactly. I'm often teaching the concept, and I love that you brought that up. We really have erased in public knowledge spaces child development.
Yes.
And we have absolutely erased child sexual development, relational development. I can remember teaching, and I'm teaching grad students in an accredited marriage and family therapy program. They have taken anywhere from 2 to 4 developmental classes by the time they get to me, and I'm doing clinical supervision with them. Not one of those developmental classes covered sexual development. Not one.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had no idea what kids would be curious about. They only had their own experience, which many of them had tried to divorce themselves from because they were bad. No one was there to say, that curiosity is delightful and wonderful. You just needed guidance on how to channel it, right? And so I wish that child development information, which is part of why I wrote Shameless Parenting, was right in front so people could go, oh, and this is what I would say to my kids who now are in their 30s. I would say, you're fulfilling your job description. You're not supposed to like what I'm asking of you right now. That is so okay. You are okay. And we're going to find a way to build the resilience in you so you can tolerate that you're being asked to do whatever the thing was, right? Just that you're how you respond. And what I see, and maybe you see this too, Sharon, is that parents are often treating their children, and this is coming from a good place, but they're treating their children from their own cognitive level. So they're wanting them to pick up after themselves. They're wanting them to comply. They're wanting them to agree. They're wanting them to see the wisdom in what they're saying. And I'm like, they're not going to be there for 15 years or 20 years, like they're totally on track. And you were right there probably at the same time. So we have to deal with them different. We don't want to shame them for not being there yet. And we are going to invite them to grow in discipline, grow in listening, grow in negotiating, grow in, right? And we've really robbed, I think, our parents, our society, of not knowing that information. Because when I was growing up, I'm 65, in the 60s and 70s, there were popular child development books. You know, we have all heard about Spock. Like everyone was reading them. And while it wasn't the be all end all, it was there. And even when my kids were little, we had some really popular books on child development that are such a help to parents. So, yeah.
Well, and I think too, when we're talking about that emotional intelligence for children, if we start early enough, we're teaching them the ability to advocate for themselves. And when I'm teaching a child where my body ends and somebody else's begins, or what their feelings are about their bodies, or all of those things, we're teaching them that advocacy. So then when they are put in those positions, they have a voice. I think what happens oftentimes, and I think because parents are afraid, there's fear involved in a lot of especially when you deal with children, because parents really are doing the best that they can, and they have all those narratives coming in at them too about you got to do this, you got to do that, so they're bombarded with all of this stuff, and I think there's also fear around things that they just don't understand or don't have comfort with. And what I hear you saying is, even as an adult, if you can learn to find that comfort in your own body, then you're more apt to teach your children to be comfortable in different situations.
Right. And I think that that's a really, really good point. How often do we examine why fear has grown?
Yeah, we don't.
There's a capitalist reason why fear has grown. I have a bonus daughter. My best friend died 13 years ago. And I have these two girls that I adore more than life itself. And one of them was having a baby. And so we were going through all of it with it. And since she was telling me this story one day, she said, the cradle that I got from my sister-in-law, because the advertising was basically saying, if you didn't have this, your child was at more likely chance to die of SIDS.
Mm-hmm.
We are pumping fear in to sell things. It's an further exploitation of people in order to push capitalism, to push buying things, as opposed to actually helping them. No, what do I need to worry about? What don't I need to worry about? What can I just sit back and enjoy in being a parent here? And so I absolutely agree with you. I think that fear has played a big role. I think that parents are doing the very best they can, but we have to ask ourselves, where is the real help for them? And for me, sometimes one of the places where I know fear is located is in their shame, because they were raised with fear and shame growing up. And so when their child does a very normal, typical thing, their internal body response is, I must be not doing a good enough job. And their mind just starts to chitter chatter, and they're feeling caught up in kind of a panic, And so that's part of wanting people to, if you're feeling that at all, walk yourself through that shameless parenting book. Go get those books at your library. Imagine you reading them to the 2-year-old. Put a picture of yourself at 2 in front of you, or 4 or 6 or 10 or 15 or 20, whatever. And then read those books, imagining you're speaking to that young child, the 16-year-old that thought they were so smart because they were older than they had ever been, but not as old as they were going to be at 19 or whatever. That was normal, but here's what you also needed in order to give you the foundation so you could recognize exploitation. You could know, like you're saying, know how to stand up for yourself and advocate for yourself, know what's truth and what's BS. That's equipping our children. And we've been so consumed with selling things and growing corporations that we have been destroying families and kids.
so much created around that with the whole shame thing, like you say, and it's creates that embarrassment. And I think that's why parents don't want to talk about it. They don't even know how to talk about it, don't know how to approach it. So I think that's really good work to be able to, give them those tools and help them recognize within themselves those things that were created
Yeah.
that causes them to want to just, put a squelch on everything like that.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. In the shameless parenting book, I'll often say, so let's just imagine that your kid walks in on you, or let's, whatever age group we're in and the things that they tend to do. You walk in and your child's got their pants down with their friend, and they're 6 or 5 or whatever. And if you can feel inside your body, even imagining that, you can feel yourself constricting. Like I would say, put your hand on your heart and just say, it's okay. The people who loved me didn't know how to give me what I needed. So I'm going to give me what I needed. Now, that body response is shame. And it starts pre-verbally. Unless you grow up in a home that understands and is pretty evolved, I guess, emotionally and relationally and with sexual health and all of that. Children are finding their genitals at 11 months, right? 10 months. They start to get control of their hands, so it's not hitting them in the face anymore. And then they manage to grab something and they're like, oh, this is a tool, and it's just shortly thereafter, within 6 weeks, usually they find their genitals when they're in the tub or they're getting their diaper changed. This is pre-verbal. Mm-hmm. And somebody, usually some caregiver that they are very attached to, is getting their entire neurosystem wired and mirrored to, goes, gross, don't, and gets loud, slaps their hand away. That child has no idea what just happened. And they won't have the cognitive development to not do that in front of that person until they're 4. So how many times does it happen between 11 months and 4? And they get that response. So what comes into them is something is profoundly wrong with me as a human.
Yeah.
It's pre-verbal. I often say, I think sexual shame in the United States is the first shame we experience and the most pervasive shame we experience, because by the time our environment has a little bit less impact on us, the culture has already taken over. We have 50% of 6-year-old girls, 2/3 of 9-year-old girls, and 90% of 15-year-old girls, this is research, already modifying their diets. They have already learned from media and from the air they breathe, the water they drink, basically, that they're not good enough, no matter how they are.
And that is so, so we have on that end, we have the body shaming that takes place. And a few weeks ago, we had on
Chicago Boudoir.
Yeah, and
Liz Hansen,
and
photographer.
Even like for her to really work, her passion became, how do we help with this body shaming and with helping women see themselves in a different light? She does it through photography. You're doing it through books. But I think that what it is we're starting to see a commonality where I think women are trying to empower other women and saying, and once again, when we're talking about body shaming, it's not strictly females now, because males, I've got to have muscles, I've got to do this, we are, and you're correct. These social constructs are really developing these children, but then when they get to be adults, then people are upset with them for how they act. But
right.
It started way before that.
Right, way before that. And people, again, and we've designed it this way, are completely ignorant to the impact of commercialism, materialism, capitalism on them and on their children and families and schools and neighbors and so on. And so they're responding in the microcosm of just me and my whatever. It's so much bigger than that. One fascinating thing to do that will underscore your point is go on Google, YouTube, one of the search kinds of engines, and ask for an image of Superman in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way up. and look at the body change, and that's on a man.
Mhm.
And you will see that was to drive people to purchase more
Mhm.
by making you feel insecure about who you are, and how you are. And I mean, we can do that with women, but it's sometimes it's a little more striking to see we've been doing this to men too.
Yeah. And I think that's what it is. When we're talking about children, we're not talking about the gender of a child. We're talking about children in general and how we,
Yeah.
I always tell people we're all conditioned.
Yes.
The thing is at some point we have to sit back and say, what is that conditioning? How does it benefit me? How is it harming me?
Yes.
And so I want to move into one and into this topic because sometimes this topic can be very uh can create different feelings and emotions in people. But when we talk about religion and shame,
Mm-hmm.
and I think once again, when we're talking about religion, I think that people are doing it with the best of intentions,
Oh, absolutely.
but sometimes the message that is given, especially to the children, and this is what I try to tell people too, the way an adult gives a message is not the way the child will interpret the message. And so the child only goes from the interpretation of what they know at that time, which is very limited. And oftentimes, even with that's good, bad,
Mm-hmm.
happy, sad. They're very, those, that dichotomy that they have within the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So when parents are saying, or they're going to church and they're learning certain things, it doesn't mean that the child is interpreting it that way, because I think what you said was very true. We have adults who are talking to children in our cognitive level here to somebody who's 4, 5, 6, 7, it doesn't matter. It's not going to match. So their interpretation is going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you help them navigate that as well? Because faith is important to everybody.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, um, there's a really good book for those people that like to read and understand from like 40,000-foot level, called The Great Spiritual Migration by Brian McLaren. Came out maybe about a decade ago, but he really describes how the movements of key religions will make some pretty profound shifts about every 500 years. And so he chronicles what's been happening in the US around evangelical Christianity in particular. So Christianity really at the sort of broad sense, you know, it used to be the Southern Baptist Church was the biggest denomination in the US as far as a Christian denomination. I'm not sure what it is now, but anyway, he talks about, so you can see the trend. And that's helpful to see a trend because we're caught in trends. We're all caught in trends, but sometimes we're not standing high enough to see what the trend is. So if that's something that's interesting to you, I would recommend that book for people. But and one of the things that I think is important, one of the takeaways from a book like that, and there are probably others, is that we've moved from a values-based, many of the religions have moved as they've become more fundamental or restrictive or, I don't know, fear-based, maybe they've moved like, we've got to get this right. Oh, my kid has to be a Christian. Oh, my kid has to be a Catholic. Oh, we get as we've moved more that way, we've moved to focus more on behavior than on values. So values is we don't believe in solving our problems with violence. We believe in using our words. We believe that being kind and respectful is something that we do. This is how Jesus was, or whoever your faith, God's people are. We want to try to help them understand. And then we have to, if we want our kids to learn it, we have to do that too. We have to be respectful. We have to be kind. We have to manage our anger. We have to, consider ourselves, but also consider the impact on the other person or whatever. That's more values-based. We've moved into and have been for quite a long time behavior-based. You need to look like this. You need to have this kind of job. You need to be this kind of person. And it doesn't matter who you are behind closed doors, as long as you are presenting this way. That's what God cares about. God cares that you are out there presenting yourself as a strong person, or as a leader in the church, or as a leader in your business, it's very behavior based, which also can be like, how do I find grace for myself when I make a mistake? There is no grace here in my family. How do I learn? How do I understand that mistakes can be part of a learning? I can turn my mistake into a lesson if I sit and examine what happened that I could do different next time, right? We don't have any of the undergirding of the values. The values have like gone down the river, and we're very much on the behaviors. So now we can be in a place where people who put themselves out as very religious people say, it's okay that that was said on that chat. That doesn't matter. People aren't really that way. They're just, how locker room talk is or whatever. No, no, no. Who you are behind closed doors is who it says what's happening in your heart. And it matters what's happening in your heart. So religions, as they become more fundamental and around power and control, more patriarchally oriented, they have become more behavior focused. And I think it increases the shame, rather than giving people a way to examine, like, help me understand how that works for you to present this way here and present this way here. Can you just help me understand that? I don't understand that. So you just invite people into a conversation to be curious, not to condemn themselves, but to be curious if this is really how they want to be.
But I think here in the United States, especially, you don't see people willing to have those conversations, whether it be about because of religion or whatever. We've made it such a taboo thing to have these conversations.
I know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. Yep.
Well, I think the other thing is, one of the things I work a lot with my clients on who have children is reminding them that children learn through behavior,
Yeah.
not through words. So if I'm presenting myself this way in public, but I'm this way at home, you've now created incongruency in the child.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Who is it that I'm going to emulate? Mm-hmm. So when you have those people who say,
yep,
we don't yell in our home, and then you yell, now you've broken the rule. So they live in kids live in a little bit of a justice system in their head.
Yes, absolutely.
So when we're doing that, I think this is where we run into some of these problems as well, is that if I want a child to learn certain thing or whatever, I've got to model that behavior, and I cannot just model it, in one place or another. And, one of the things I did play therapy for years. And so that was so important to me that I made sure if I was out in public, I'm in a small community when I was doing that. Well, I'm bigger community as well. Yeah. But always remembering that when I was in public, because you run into these kiddos, they don't care who you are, where you're at. They're right. The way they're going to be, and they're going to go, hug on you, whatever they do. But understanding that in that environment, I have to treat them the same way I would treat them in my office, because there has to be that congruency. And I think that's where parents struggle, because they struggle maybe with who I really am, that authentic piece of me, and how I would really want to parent. But then I have groups, organizations, or whatever telling me that I should be parenting this way. And so I think that creates those same things. But I think once again, it goes back to that same thing of when we do not teach children how to advocate for themselves, how to have that voice, we continue to see that. And I think it's such a systemic problem that we have.
It is, yeah.
And I think it's really cool. What we've been so fortunate to have these people on our podcast that are trying to change. They're putting out stuff. How do we bring about change so that people are okay?
Right. Well, and the invitation inside the work that I'm doing is inviting parents to realize you're only going to be as effective with your child as you've healed yourself. Yeah. That just at that congruency that you're talking about there. And because what happens when we demonstrate incongruency with our children, we tell them one thing, but we do another, is they lose respect in us. And that may not get expressed until adolescence, but trust me, it will.
Mhm.
Because you have said that your word doesn't matter, that what you say is not grounded in anything. You're telling me to do one thing, you're doing another. You're telling me to be truthful, but I'm watching you tell lies over here. Or you say, don't yell or don't hit my brother or sister, and you're over here doing it. What I'm learning is you're not to be trusted. I'm learning I can't respect you because of your incongruency. That's real. And then this leads to can lead to very difficult relationships as children grow up, adolescence and beyond, right? A parent has to have done their own work enough that when the child says, Mom, you say we're not supposed to yell, and you just yelled at that car, even though the car couldn't hear you.
Mhm.
Whoa, you are so right. I made a big mistake right there. I did not manage the emotion I was feeling inside my stomach, and it came right out my mouth. I'm really sorry. I am going to work so much harder at that.
I think that's
We show then how you get called out and own your stuff. A child will respect you as a human, and now you've demonstrated how you own your mistakes.
and I think often too, we live in a society where we're always telling children what not to do. So then we leave them up to their own devices. So they use their brain to say, okay, if I'm not supposed to do this, I'm going to do this. Well, then they get trouble for that. I always tell people, tell them what you want them to do, and let's get rid of all that middle ground so they're not being told 900 times, well, that's not what I said. No. And also, I think when we're looking at children and this, and once again, understanding that parents are under a tremendous amount of pressure
Yes.
as well.
Mhm.
Once again, I think you're right. There's a lot of the capitalism, there's a lot of these social constructs of who I'm supposed to be, how I'm supposed to be. But when we're talking to children, and I love that word respect. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard in my office a parent telling a 6-year-old, you need to show some respect. And my response is, what does that look like?
Yes.
The word means absolutely nothing. I said, we have to teach these things.
By demonstrating them.
Yes.
We were in our grocery store one day, and this man was with his little kid, probably about 3 years old or something like that, 4. And so he tells the little kid, go get a couple of apples, I think it was. Well, the kid comes back with 3. So the dad's mad at him, but I'm watching. So I'm just standing watching because I'm thinking, this is fascinating. Well, what? And then he's agitated with them. And then I'm watching. Well, he obviously feels me watching. So he kind of turns and looks because he's already told the kid something about, like, what? Are you stupid? You don't understand or whatever. And I'm just looking at him. And then he looks down at the little boy. The little boy is happy as just happy. And he looks and he goes, do you know what a couple means? And the little boy goes, no. He goes, oh no, he means that just means 2. So the little boy ran back and put 1 back and it had 2. These are the things, once again, we use verbiage that children do not understand.
And concepts they don't understand and shouldn't understand yet. It's
And
not fair to expect them to.
And I tell people, children are always afraid they're going to be in trouble. Anytime an adult talks to a child, I always tell them they go to what? Fight or flight. And I'll tell them, pay attention to you when somebody of authority, even if it's a good thing, wants to talk to you. What do? I get afraid. Well, that's your kid. I said, you have to understand that we're all learning together. And we're all learning in real time.
That's right.
And I think when we continue to have these conversations, and we continue to have people like you who are doing these organizations looking at, what does the data look like? What is research telling us? And what are we going to learn from it? And then from that research, what do we do differently? And it sounds like that's what you're doing with your whole conceptualization of what's going on here.
Yeah, I think I'm a big picture thinker. I want to understand the context in order to understand what's trickling down and affecting my life or this person's life or family or community or whatever. is I really believe we're shaped by our context. We're shaped by the town that we live in, the communities that are around us, the family of origin that we're born into, the time in history that we're living in. All of those things are shaping us. So in order to understand ourselves in context, it really helps to look at, so what's been going on, you know? And so that's always where I tend to go, is like, let's just, because I want you to know it's not you. It's not you. It's you're breathing air and drinking a water that's happening in culture right now. And in your family or your town or part of the US or wherever you are, you could be in another country, but that's shaping you.
You know what's interesting, because you just talked about a few of the things that are shaping us, but we look at gender shapes us.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
We look at our ethnic background shape us.
Yes.
There are so many variables. Our education.
Yes.
Do we go to an affluent school or do we go to a school? All of the things that shape us.
Yeah.
There are so many variables that I always tell parents, you're not the only variable, but you might be the most important variable.
For a little while.
In those
Mhm.
early things.
Yeah.
And the other thing I always remind parents is, when I work with them, and if I see their fund, I'll tell them, you have a strong foundation. And your kids are being reactive. Well, what did I do wrong? What am I supposed to do? Sometimes it's not what you're doing. Once again, there's all these variables. Oh,
That's
and
right.
let's not even go into that we now have social platforms
Mm-hmm.
with all that influence coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And when kids are certain ages, we already talked about that. We're talking about ages and stages of development. But these social platforms did not take into account ages and stages of development.
Well, that was not their point. Their point was to sell more and make
Mhm.
money for their stockholders this quarter. And when that's your primary thing, you don't care about fallout. So even when the Congress brings out what the fallout is, you just lie yourself around it. That's the culture we live in.
Right.
I mean, it is plain and simple. We don't hold people accountable for their impact. Companies, corporations, CEOs, whatever, we don't hold them accountable for the impact on culture. We have completely erased the idea of reciprocity, an indigenous idea of reciprocity, which is my life could affect you and your life could affect me, and we need to care for each other. We don't live in isolation. And if we live as if we're in isolation, it's an unsustainable model that will eventually cause massive destruction.
Absolutely. And I think when you're putting, and I imagine people, when they listen to this and say, oh my God, there's a lot.
There's a lot.
So if you had to break down, and you had to tell our listeners what you think is the most relevant, or the thing that they could maybe work on, those small things, because I was telling people, don't go try to fix everything at one time. We don't get to do that. Just pick little things, please,
Yeah.
and work on that sustainability.
Right, exactly. And you're so right, because it can feel overwhelming. And sometimes listening to me, because I've been in swimming in the whole big thing, I can sound really overwhelming. But what's the one thing I can do? I'll often recommend get shameless parenting. And I tell people, if you can't afford it for some reason, I don't want you to not do it. If you really want to do this, just DM me in social media or in Instagram. I will send you a promo code to get the book, either book. If you're really wanting to do this, and you can't afford it. But then walk yourself through the developmental stages, read, ask yourself the questions I'm asking, people to sort of wonder about, and then go literally at the end of every chapter, here's the leading books for kids and the leading books for parents. Go get those books. Spend a month or two on each section and imagine that you're just noticing those parts of you that were impacted. And maybe you'll find out, oh, I think I did get a lot of this from my grandma. That was really nice. I'm glad I did. Or, oh, you'll just start putting your own narrative together, your own story together. For people that maybe are more like writers, or that doesn't sound as appealing, you can go to my website, which is just my name, Schermer-Sellers.com. And on the homepage, there's a place that says Sexual Reclamation Project. And you can click on it, and it will give you a PDF that just asks you a bunch of questions, that walks you through questions about gender, affection, how conflict was done, how you learned about sexuality. And it walks you through your parents and grandparents, and then your childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. And then it asks at the end, looking back at this, how do you feel about it? Do you want to carry this legacy forward, or do you want to make any changes? And what would be the changes you would want to make? That's just another way to do a very similar thing that happens with the Shameless Parenting book. Whatever seems more fun, but take on something around the task of healing yourself first, because then you are a different instrument in the world. In your own life, you're more graceful to yourself, you're more kind to yourself. You go, well, of course I get scared there. I got the PWAC and Whittly Dink scared out of me when I started my period, or when I had my first wet dream, or whatever, like, no wonder I'm scared. It's okay. My parents loved me, but they just didn't know, because they had gotten it too. We've been shaming people for their desires, which is a life force at the root of all our creativity as humans. When I desire something, whether it's a cup of coffee or to start an honor rising, right? It's a desire. It comes from this. It's a life force. But we've been shaming people around desire since the 4th century. When Constantine was the emperor, became a quote unquote Christian, and that he started to appoint the leaders of the brand new church, and the men were all vying for positions based on who could deny the body the best. There was nothing Christian about that. That is just what was going on in culture. And we have been shaming people for their desires ever since, even though it's one of the most incredible things about being human,
Well, I think it's interesting too, because oftentimes I think when teaching parenting or things like that, once again, I think even within our field, doing the best that we can, because we're doing it all in real time, so to speak. But oftentimes when teaching parenting, sometimes we get so fixated on changing a behavior, we're not developing the child.
That's right. Yeah.
When I taught parenting classes, I used this incredible curriculum called Strengthening Families. So it tells you right in the thing where it was about strengthening the families. It was about teaching parents to talk with their children about their dreams, their desires. What is it? What we're capable of, and nurturing in a different way, because anybody can change a behavior.
Right.
But changing a behavior does not change the internal dialogue.
Right. I mean, that's so important, Sharon. That conversation is so important. And even like getting people, what has created change for you when you needed to shift at what helped you the most? And a lot of times it's often getting down underneath it, like what's motivating that behavior? Is there a fear there? Is there a value there? If I don't stand up for myself, no one will, and I've got to do it in a big way. What's there? Let's look at what's driving that, and then examine, how's it working for you? And if it's not, what might work better? Let's just get underneath it. There's nothing, we all have, call them bad habits, call them unhelpful narratives, things that we have absorbed from the culture that we live in. We learn how to exploit people based on the culture we live in. And that's acceptable. But is it acceptable? Does it cost us our relationships, our authentic relationships? And is that going to be okay to us when we're 85 and we look back on our life and all of our relationships were transactional? None of them were authentic. No one really knew me. Is that going to be okay with you? Because I worked in oncology for a decade. For a lot of people, when they're examining their lives, they're not always happy with the choices that they made, but it was so influenced by the culture that they lived in that they didn't, and no one was inviting examination. There was just excuses, right?
Well, I think it's also, if we ask ourselves the question of what do I want my legacy to be?
Yes. Mwah.
Anytime you can ask that question, what do I want my legacy to be?
Yes,
And my legacy doesn't mean to the world, but it means to the people that matter.
that's right.
And I think, I work so much more with men. That's in the last 12 years, my practice moved. I do a lot more men. I started with children and women and that. And, as I've been working with, and I'll tell them, I'm so sorry because as a society, we have done a disservice to you.
Yes,
You die
absolutely.
younger. The reason you die younger is because you are falling into this narrative of what a man is supposed to be.
Mhm.
And it's killing men faster. And it's part of that is, and I'll ask them, what do you think is going to happen if you explore your emotions? Crickets.
Right.
It's fear.
Crickets.
Yeah, it's that narrative that we teach them.
Yeah.
Boys don't cry. You would think that we are in the year that we are, you would think that we would have stopped with some of the stuff that we know is not healthy.
Right.
But how many times do you listen and you'll hear these male CEOs, well, if you're not working 80 hours a week, then you're not doing your job, or you're not. In a lot
There
of
was
them,
an article in Wired magazine last week.
oh,
It interviewed 5 different CEOs. Mind you, all of them were under the age of 30. And they were talking about how we're hitting a tipping point in the corporate world where you believe you work a 996, 9 to 9, 6 days a week. That's the only way you get ahead. So watch this start to increase now over the next year or two, because it's coming, and it's coming from 20-year-olds who are in their own developmental blind spot. I'm sorry, I don't want to live like I did at 20. Most people don't at 50 don't look back and say that was my wisest phase.
mhm.
And yet right now, some of the young billionaires are shaping corporate culture. And I know this because I've got people who work for Amazon and Google and whatever, and they're all having to go back, and they're now being asked to work on Saturdays. I mean, it's insane what's happening. And again, it's to drive our economy or to drive the capitalism. It is not for people's health and wellness.
No, and I always tell people you have to understand, what are you getting out of it? And I understand everybody has to work.
Yes, right, of
The
course.
thing is that you need to find that place. We have too many people. I hear it all the time. I hate my job. I'm miserable. So how can I help you with your mental health when you're stuck in a job? Either you need to change the way you look at the job, or you need to change a job. I can't, we don't have the power to fix this societal construct right now. But I think a little bit at a time. And I think it's a weird dichotomy with right now with this, because you have those who are 20 years old and they're excelling, and then you have the other part of they're like, oh, I don't like it. You yelled at me, I quit.
Yeah.
So we have this, there's like this, it's like we don't have this balance. We're out of balance, I think is
We're
what.
completely out of balance. Yeah, that is such a good point. Well, if I just make enough money, I can tell anybody to do anything and go anywhere I want them to. And I won't be held accountable, because look at all the people around me who aren't held accountable. All I got to do is have that first billion. That's all I got to do. And then I'm like, you're going to work for me, and you're going to work for me on my schedule. And if you don't, you're gone. And I can do that because working for me, you get some money. I can treat people terribly. There's a good book that came out last year. I don't know if I'll remember the name of it. Careless People, written by, her last name I think is Wynn, Whynn, but she worked for Facebook, Meta, for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, from like 2011 to, whatever, 2019 or something like that, somewhere in there. And this was a time when they were going global. And you really began to see the C-suite of Facebook, those people who were all earning $1 billion. The idea in the book is people were at beyond a point where they knew they could never run out of money. And then how they treated people, because they had people doing everything for them except for probably following them to the bathroom. And then the way they just started mistreating people, and there was no accountability because they could afford it. They could afford to treat people as expendable. This is the value system that you can see operating. If I just make enough, then I can do whatever I want to, and it doesn't matter. But the thing is, it does matter.
It is so interesting because we're rewatching Northern Exposure.
Mhm.
This was the topic the other night
Mhm.
when Ed, the Native American young kid, is asked to watch the home of the wealthy man. He'd never been in a house that big,
Mhm.
so he's supposed to house it. Well, then he puts on his jacket. Pretty soon he's acting like him. He's ordering things. He's doing stuff. When he goes back to his apartment, he can't stand it. It's small. We got to get out of here. And then he goes and he starts treating his friends like
Poorly.
poorly
Yes.
and all that. They're just kind of looking like, what is going on here? And then anyway, the owner comes home, which is his boss, gets mad at him. What are you doing? Why would you do this? And he starts to realize, he goes, I was put in the I'm in this situation and I became the situation. I
Yeah,
became
exactly.
this person. And he goes, you're going to be alone,
That's right. That's exactly right.
you know? But it was just the way, I think the way in which that episode did this so beautifully, of because he's his hired help.
That's
He's
right.
always telling him, go do this, go do that, go do, not please, thank you, none of that. So
No,
he started emulating that.
that's
And that is
right.
a good way even to show parents and parent-child relationship.
That's right. Yes,
They emulate
absolutely.
what they hear.
Yeah. What is modeled for them, what is demonstrated, and is often consistently demonstrated, you
Wow.
know. Yeah. We're
I
in a
mean,
heap of trouble. We really do need to take the gift of our lives seriously. You know, you're going to be on this earth for a flash. No matter what AI is saying, trust me, if things keep going, you're not going to want to live forever. But it's going to be a flash. Is it the flash you want? No one has walked this earth exactly like you. You are nothing short of a miracle. Are you taking the miracle of your life and the miracle of the life you get to live, these few years, whatever, on the scheme of things, are you living it so that your legacy is something that you're proud of, so that love, safety in your relationships, authenticity within yourself? You're not afraid to be alone, and you love being with others, and you keep things in balance. Like, it's an incredible opportunity that we're being given to live a life. Are we taking advantage of that in such a way that we are honoring ourselves and honoring the people around us? And that often is going to take some work, because we've got some healing to do. Because if we were not treated well growing up, then we've got some work to do. We've got some healing to do.
wow.
So,
These are such important topics right now. I mean, we could talk forever, but I love the way that you ended that, because I think that is the hope.
Yeah.
And all we can do is provide hope and then provide the tools to help people on this journey to
Right.
their authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
yes, and I
Exactly.
like to say on Two Girls in a Pod, how are you spinning your light? And I think that you're able to do that, through that healing process,
Mhm.
and bring your most authentic self to the world.
And
Mhm.
let's light this world up with that authenticity, because if we do, we
Mhm.
get to live in a much healthier space.
Yeah, and a much more fun space, an enjoyable space, and we get to know joy. Like, it really does make everything better when I am at peace with myself, and I'm at peace with how I'm behaving and being in the world, the values that I embrace and how I live those out. You have so much more spaciousness inside yourself, and yeah, invest in yourself, invest in your healing, invest in figuring out what the best you is going to look like, and then go get the support you need to bring that to fruition. You'll never regret investing in yourself, because then everything else flows from that, your investment in other people, etc. But it's more important, I think, once you've taken care of, do I have enough food and do I have shelter? Am I just relatively safe? After that, invest in yourself and your healing and become the best you can be for you.
Perfect.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Tina Schermer-Sellers. We are so grateful that you are on with us today.
Thank you so
And
much. It
we
was so
have,
fun.
links in the description, how you can find her and information. Thank you for tuning in.
And we will be back next time. Thank you.
Thank you.